Horizon channel, Somsuji Reaction. This is Man in Cave by the channel Internet Historian, part 2 I guess. I did the half of this video yesterday when it was uploaded, I guess just after 2-3 hours. Yeah, so this story so far has been really intense because a man, basically a town where caves are the only source of income apparently, because the farming is not much promising there. One guy, tried to, I guess, explore his cave and realized that there's a spot which could be really great for tourism. So he just started to make the opening bigger and bigger, and in the end got stuck there. I mean, obviously the passage was so small, 9 inches. Damn. I mean, when I think about it, I don't think I would fit in those 9 inches, really. So yeah, you would need really slim people, right, just to get inside there. But yeah, I guess I can see his I guess point of view why I was trying to do that, because it's there is no other source of income besides caves, I guess, and he found a sweet spot. So obviously he's going to try to salvage this. But yeah, you need big balls, let's just say, to do that, which he had. But he got stuck in the end, and obviously nobody besides his brother tried to help. And then eventually a reporter, of all people, right? You don't think of reporter as some hardy, outdoorsy type of people. Of course, they go to dangerous places to report on things. You need to be somewhat athletic for that, but still, not being a cave explorer and doing that and going in there risking his life, yeah, that was something. So story is ridiculous so far, and apparently it's a famous one judging from the comments. I didn't know that, but yeah, the cave has so far now has become such a tourist attraction, because this was like what, nearly 100 years before, 100 years before. So since that, it has become this kind of a tourist attraction type of thing. So yeah, at least he got what he wanted, right? It did become famous and people did came to visit. So yeah, so let's watch the half end of it. I don't know what's gonna happen here, right? I don't know what's going to be the end. I really tried really hard to not Google his name and any of this story, because I didn't want to ruin this end. Internet Historian is great at filmmaking, I guess, let's just say, right? His it's a twist and things, he just times it right, just hits it perfectly. I guess that's one of the main thing about Internet Historian, why his videos are good. So I wanted to preserve the last part, so let's watch it.
Pedestrians would gather around corner store windows to read the latest bulletins. The press began using giant typefaces, commonly only reserved for declarations of war. Churches in all of the nearby counties were holding services for Floyd. Theatres even interrupted their shows to update the audience. Now, at the time, President Coolidge was in charge, and his Secretary of Commerce was a geologist, Herbert Hoover. Now, Mr. Hoover followed the story very closely, and so it was likely that the president did too. Even Congress paused session to ask about the latest news from Sand Cave. By the end, the Floyd Collins incident would explode into the third largest non-political story between World War I and World War II. All of this excitement brought an inundation of people to Cave City. Old population, 690. Yawn. New population, 10,000. Hotels ran out of food. Residents turned their homes into makeshift hotels, charging sizable premiums to let people nap in their bathtubs. The banks quickly ran out of on-hand cash, and 4,500 automobiles impatiently sat backed up for 2 miles from 20 different states to drive onto the Collins farm and turn their pristine green pastures into swampy parking lots. Deep below all those tourists, there's Miller, trying to free Floyd. Alright, a little bit of setup. Floyd, Miller, some remaining rubble, rock. For anyone to lift the rock by hand would be impossible because Floyd's body obstructs the hole. Miller grabs a crowbar and shoves it through the gap. Now he's going to lever it off Floyd's foot. Cool. The crowbar is now wedged against the rock. Next, he takes a jack. He positions it on top of the crowbar so that it will be forced against the ceiling. However, problem. That jack is too big. It doesn't fit. Miller yells up the tunnel for a smaller one, but this took some time. And when it arrived, too small, won't reach the ceiling.
What
But
the
instead
hell?
of sending for another one, Miller takes 2 blocks of wood
Yeah.
and bolsters them underneath the crowbar. Right, so the crowbar now sits higher, it fulcrums against the blocks, and the jack is sitting on top. All Miller has to do is expand the jack, which he will do using this spanner, holding it at the very tips of his fingers. Sounds easy. It's not. But that's the plan. Let's get him out of there. He turned the wrench, the jack expanded, and the crowbar took strain. The whole thing slid apart with a pang. Floyd wasn't hurt, but Miller was contorting and exerting his whole body from back to fingertip. They tried again. Same result. Miller tried a new angle. Maybe this time. The jack pressed. The tension increased.
Okay.
And this time, the rock moved. It fucking moved.
Woo!
With each turn, the stone shifted a little more. Miller's hands shook with adrenaline, his face and body dripping with sweat. Pang. One of the blocks slipped, and the wooden tower went sideways. The rock painfully slammed back down on Colin's foot.
You'll get it next time, Miller. Try again.
Miller did. Again. And again. Adding blocks, taking them away, new crowbar position, changed the jack position, every angle, all while Floyd was there, cheering him on.
Yay.
Okay. Seriously, man, if the rock moves even a bit, isn't that enough of space for him to move his leg away? I know he's stuck there, but can't he just move Miller can't he just move him a bit just so his leg comes out? I don't know. This is really, I mean, this position is as fucked up as it can get, right? I mean, how bad luck can there be? I mean, it's a really small area. It's at a 90-degree turn, and there's a rock literally at the end of it, where nobody can reach it. The Miller, basically, journalist, is just doing anything he can to basically lift it. So I guess, wouldn't it be good to use the rope thing together? This, as soon as a rock moves a bit, people just pull with the rope. I know he was just slamming on top of it, but without the rock below, I guess he would slide out, wouldn't it? I don't know. Somebody told me in the comments that all you have to do is, I guess, bolt something, or I don't know exactly. This is how this is how I understood it. Bolt something in the opposite direction, and then pull the rope. That would pull him outside, and then you can pull him up. I don't know. That would have worked.
For the next 4 hours he tried. No progress. Miller was exhausted. He couldn't do this on his own, but he was the only one slim enough to get in through the gap. The group decided to concede for now and return to the surface. They would take just a small break, but it looked to everyone like there was a clear way to get this man out. So Miller and Burden crawled back through the mud and the whines of the cave. As they made their way through, the cave was visibly sagging. The ceiling seemed lower. Parts were harder to navigate than before, especially now with their bruised and purple hands.
What?
But they made it outside to the fresh, early morning air. And here is where they're greeted with a new sight. Dozens of soldiers. The National Guard had arrived. In
Okay.
addition to the National Guard, a new figure was joining the story, Henry Carmichael. Now, Carmichael was the general superintendent of the Kentucky Rock Asphalt Company. He had
Damn.
been on site since Tuesday, and he was appalled at how primitive the rescue attempts had been. Shortly after Miller and co. had exited, Carmichael sent 2 men into Sand Cave to assess the structure's stability. They soon came back with a report. It was not good. Near the final squeeze, large cracks had formed. The ceiling was beginning to droop. Alright, so the following is a recounting of events from one of Carmichael's men, Casey Jones. Casey and another worker spent about an hour in the cave, surveying its condition, looking at the boards, the ceiling, the stability of the walls. He continued deeper towards Floyd. He was fighting against his nerves. The shifting of the rock pinged his every instinct to flee. But he heard Collins moaning ahead, so he pushed himself on. He managed to make it through the squeeze, and he arrived at the 10-foot pit. Seeing Floyd trapped, he tried to ignore the pebbles that were tumbling behind him.
Holy shit.
Come down.
I can't right now, Floyd, but I will when I get back.
Behind Casey, his partner is begging to leave. Below Casey, Collins is pleading for help.
Please, I'm so thirsty.
Okay.
Casey slid headfirst into the pit and hastily ladled Floyd some coffee. But Floyd rejected it.
No.
Rumbling intensified from above, and in that moment, Casey realized that this was not a plea for sustenance. Floyd knew that a cave-in was inevitable. Scared and approaching his 5th day trapped, he was completely at his wit's end. He knew he was about to be trapped in that cave, and he didn't want to be trapped alone.
What the
For
fuck?
God's sake, Casey, come on, you'll get us killed.
Stay with me, please. Don't leave.
Oh my god. Oh, that just hurts, man. The psychology behind that just hurts me. I mean, he's been here for 114 hours, right? He's been as strong as you can hope for anybody, right? Like, and now after all this, his will is breaking away, right? Like, everybody's tried everything, right? Holy shit, it's been a long time now. And he knew that, okay, this is it. I'm going to be trapped, and that's the end. And he just doesn't want his last moment to be alone. I mean, this is just too fucked up, man.
Casey looked into Collins' eyes, set the coffee down, and pulled himself out of the pit. He wiggled underneath the sagging ceiling and crawled towards the turnaround room as fast as his limbs could scramble against the cave walls. He looked back to see the passage closing like a maw. Reflections from the bulb shining around Floyd's neck were no longer visible. Instead, just sobs could be heard, muffled from behind the rocks.
Damn, man.
Miller and Burden awoke in the late morning, confident that today would be the day that they saved Floyd.
Oh, holy shit, they
They had
didn't know.
some new
They don't know.
equipment too. Some wire to wrap around the wooden blocks to prevent them from slipping. And they changed their mind about that acetylene torch. They'll use it to burn away 2 rocks that had previously blocked their way. But when Miller got to the turnaround room, all of that optimism left him. The entrance to the squeeze was now just a pile of debris. Miller froze, staring at it for a long while. Then he sighed and did the only thing he could think: attempt to move some of the stones. But each adjustment led to more rocks just tumbling down and landing in that space. He persisted until... crash. A large chunk of clay landed onto his feet. Recognizing the danger, Miller returned to the surface. 15 minutes later, he emerged from the cave with a bloodied-up nose and bruises down his back and shoulders. Burden caught sight and races over to him. Miller just says, "For God's sake, just don't let Homer or anyone else back in there." Now, he didn't actually need to worry about Homer going back in there because he was sidelined with illness. But he did, however, need to worry about Gerald because he was furious. Gerald had warned everyone that putting dozens of people in Sand Cave would cause a collapse. It certainly did. The rest of that day would be wasted as men threw blame around and screamed at each other about how to handle the cave-in. And Floyd...
God damn, these imbeciles never helped, right? Most of them, right? Never helped. And if anything, they are the fucking reason this cave collapsed in the first place. This is just horrible, man. I don't know why this is it's just pissing me off, man. You know, anybody just spectates there, the crowd. They rarely help, and if anything, they always make things worse. This is the image of, I guess, humanity now.
spent the rest of that day alone. The surveyors continued checking the cave throughout the day. By the evening, Carmichael had ordered everyone to an assembly. Gerald took the floor. He was going to try one last daring rescue. He boldly announced his plan and an ultimatum.
Listen up. There's death down there. The walls and ceilings are crumbling. Unless you're determined to take the biggest chance you ever took in your life, tell me now and stay outside.
Next, they told all the Gorkas to get the fuck out of the cave, clear off. And over the next 8 hours, Gerald would enter and leave Sand Cave at least 5 times, chipping away at that pile of debris. In the woods, men sawed trees and chopped logs to shore up the cave walls. Underground, the crew reinforced cracks and wobbling boulders with fresh strips of wood. Gerald assessed that about 4 barrels of rocks would need to be moved, and piece by piece, they made that happen. Steadily, they managed to move enough rock to allow Gerald to get within earshot of Floyd.
Hey! Hello? I need food.
Bad news! We can't reach you. But hold on, we're coming.
Stone by stone, they continued. After a few hours, the light of the bulb around Floyd's neck was peeking through. A couple more hours, enough room for Gerald to squeeze through.
Okay, that's enough. Floyd, I'm going for now. But when I get back, I'm gonna get you out of there.
Exhausted but still determined, Gerald crawled back up the cave and marched to the men huddling outside.
Gather the equipment, and in an hour's time, it's gonna be me and Floyd coming out of that cave.
Holy shit.
Gerald entered Sand Cave for his final time. The walls had been reinforced, but mud and water was accumulating everywhere. He waded through it and pressed on past the danger of the sagging ceiling. With determination on his face and a grease gun clutched in his right hand, he scrambled towards Floyd. But before the final squeeze, he stopped. It was all gone.
What
The cave
fuck?
ceiling had crumbled once again. Gerald stared motionlessly at the pile. Then he began to yell.
Floyd!
A rock disconnected from the ceiling and tumbled onto Gerald's head. Luckily, just a small one. He rubbed his scalp and called out again.
Floyd!
This time, a moan. It rumbled from the other side. Fearing that his friend was slipping out of consciousness, Gerald willed himself against the cave, launching the debris behind him with force. He ignored the pain from being struck on the head and clawed at the stone pile. He
God
carried on
damn.
this way for several minutes, until a sharp, heavy rock dropped from the ceiling and landed squarely on his back. No more than 15 minutes later, Gerald returned to the surface, defeated.
God.
Only after the cave-ins did they start to think about all of the things that they could have done.
Wait, why didn't we rig a portable telephone line? That would have been incredibly simple here in 1925.
Yeah, why have we been running in and out to deliver updates?
Why didn't we give him an AM radio? He could have had something to listen to and receive messages of support from the public.
Wait, why don't we rig up a tarpaulin so we could lift his torso up so he wouldn't be slowly dying of exposure?
Oh god, why didn't we run a feeding tube? That's also a technology we have in 1925.
All too late. Now what? The one route to get to Floyd is closed forever. That meant 2 options. Number 1, capitulation. Surrender him to the cave.
Holy shit, first of all, really man, the cave-in thing is just heartbreaking, right? I mean, they just moved 5 barrels of rock, opened the passage, hope was up, he came back and it just dropped again. This is just horrible. And everybody just like becoming Mr. Hindsight or whatever from South Park. We should have done this, we should have done that. Yeah, you didn't though, did you? Holy shit. I mean, this has become the national news. Even president are, asking for it. Senate is asking for it. In an entire country, really, there is no solution from experts. Even the rock company people were there. They have no solution. This is just horrible to think, man.
Well, number 2. Dig down from directly above Floyd. Now, the prospect of digging from above seemed almost fanciful. At least, it did in the beginning. But luckily, they had some help. Owing to Miller's reporting, Floyd had become practically the most famous person in the country.
Yeah.
The rescue had become a high priority for the governor of Kentucky. Lieutenant General Denhart enters the scene. He's been updated on the situation, and following shortly behind him is a small army of miners and engineers. He declared to the despondent crowd, "Gentlemen, I am here on behalf of the governor. The purse strings of Kentucky are open. Take this blank check and bring that man out alive.
Holy shit.
Floyd, in that cold, wet confine, could not have imagined the scale of the operation that was going on 55 feet above him. Authorities assumed control of Colin's rescue. Denhart gave Henry Carmichael the lead to dig, and Carmichael raced to get to work. He enlisted his employees, his fleet of expensive high-tech machinery. Professional groups were brought in from all across the state. Local townspeople were mostly excluded, and for the first time since Collins had been trapped, work was now about to go ahead in a systematic manner. Everyone knew the plan. Everyone had something to do.
Professionals
and
are
everyone was working fast. But just as hopes were rising, they were once again dashed against the rocks.
Why?
They had all of this state-of-the-art machinery shipped in and assembled by the engineers and rearing to go, and it was all worthless. See, the problem is, the cave drew air into it. These diesel-powered engines pumped out enormous volumes of choking exhaust. Within a day's operation, the cave would be filled with carbon monoxide and Floyd would be dead from asphyxiation.
What the hell?
Just as quickly as solutions would arise, the cave would parry them away. It refused to let this man go. So engineers and miners had wasted hours assembling everything, only to realize that they had to pack it all up and cart it away. Because the digging of a 55-foot shaft would be done with picks and shovels.
Holy shit.
Carmichael didn't know much about caves, but he knew a lot about quarrying, and he estimated that his team of 75 volunteers could dig and dredge at a rate of 2 feet per hour. If they worked around the clock, they would be digging directly into the spot where Floyd lays within 30 hours. Now, was it possible that Floyd could survive for another 30 hours? Absolutely. Let's go. The first ton was moved, and at first it was easy work. Just dirt and clay. Carmichael understood well that this was a race against time, so he watched the men closely, and if they seemed to be slowing down, even a little, they would be yanked out, and immediately a new worker subbed in. Nonetheless, the pace slowed. By 10 feet, the shaft narrowed greatly, which meant that only 2 men could work at a time. At 15 feet, they hit boulders. Pickaxes went in, and a system of pulleys and buckets had to be used to cart the rock out. Tracks were even laid to ferry the refuse to a dump site.
Whoa, this is the real
Time
one.
passed. Hours passed. Night went to day. The day was hot. This was yet another problem, because it's early February, there's tons of ice still in the ground, and its exposure to the fresh midday sun meant that the walls of the shaft were softening and the ground becoming sodden. The pace of digging slowed. It was now only half a foot per hour. Most anyone could do was watch.
Oh my god, if the pace is slowing this slow, it would take a long, like multiple days just to get there. I don't think he can survive without water for that long. And even especially at the end when the cave-in happened, I don't think anybody brought him water. So he's been without water for a good enough time already. See, this is really fucked up because entire country is basically focused on this. The governor has said blank check, anybody do anything, right? All bring in any expert you have and try to do this, and still it's fucked up. It's still hard. This is just horrible all around. I don't know, I have a feeling this is not going to end well, is it? I don't know. The cynical side of me thinking this is not going to end well. I don't know the end result here, but I think this is not going to end well.
Helplessly on the sidelines and pray. Interestingly, though, there were a lot of people on the sidelines. Floyd wouldn't have believed that the space above him had turned into a literal carnival in his honor. Vendors showed up to sell hamburgers, hot dogs, and souvenirs. Families sprawled out over blankets to listen to hymns from local church groups. The local mountebanks sold moonshine and miracle cures. There was even a bloody juggler. And Old Man Lee was there, walking around, shaking his jar, and soliciting donations. But where were Homer and Burden and Miller during all of this? Okay, let's back up a bit. People did not...
Alright, look, I get it, right? People care, so they're gathering there. It's a good thing, right? Obviously, what he was trying to do, make it famous, it did become famous. But in the end, I cannot stop but think that a man is trapped, he's about to die, and, you know, people are profiting from it, right? All these people open shop, this and that, carnival shit, whatever. I don't know, man. This is just fucked up.
Properly understand exactly how Floyd was trapped, and the news didn't help much either. So the obvious question started to arise. Why hasn't he been rescued yet? Just clear some gravel or pull a rope. How is this so hard? Motive was attributed.
I heard they didn't even want to have him rescued at all.
I heard that they're doing all of this for publicity.
And Lee's activity of soliciting donations, remember from before, further inflamed rumors.
I bet Floyd isn't even trapped in there.
These were all real rumors, and they got worse.
You know what? I've heard he comes out at night, and then he just goes back in the morning.
Other rumors included,
I heard that after Floyd went into the cave, someone murdered him.
others said,
I think they're withholding food and water from him so he dies.
This whole thing is a fraud.
As time went on, it was harder and harder to ignore the hoax claims. Then, people started to form righteous mobs, claiming the whole thing was a fraud, and they started to get nasty. In fact, 2 people even went to the telegraph office and pretended to be Floyd, sending telegrams to his mother. Here's what it said. Quote, "Please contradict statements that I am buried alive in Sand Cave."
What the fuck is wrong with people, man? It's one thing to have, we humans have imagination, right? I mean, how you gonna explain novels, different type of novels, fictional stories, Lord of the Rings and shit like that, Star Wars. We have strong imagination. So when we have very little information, our mind wanders and just comes up with assumptions. Makes sense. But you act on that, right? People pretending to be Floyd and doing this shit, I mean, that's just malicious at that point. Like, why would you fucking do that? What's wrong with you, right? People actually creating mob and going to their cave and just be acting on it, even though they know these are just stupid rumors, right? Especially the original ones who came up with it, right? Rumor starts with first person lying, using their imagination, whether they are fucked up in the head or just point blank lying. I don't know. But still, well, this is just horrible. But this thing right here, please contradict statement that I am buried alive in Sand Cave. Why would you do this?
Stop. Tell mother I am all right. Stop. Am coming home. Stop. Floyd Collins. Naturally, the AP published these telegrams unquestioningly, and now word is out to the press that he isn't actually in the cave after all. That made the authorities look foolish, and it could not go on.
Oh,
so,
for fuck's
a hasty court-martial was arranged, and Homer, Miller, and Gerald were summoned. They hold one session on Monday and another on Tuesday. Lee and everyone else is cleared of charges, a retraction is written, and things carry on.
This brings up a interesting topic that scientists throughout the years has been, focusing on, that we as humans, are we moral, right? Because sure, we can be moral, one or two, but whenever it's a group of people, crowd, most of the time we don't act moral, right? It's always hurting somebody, right? Whether it's rumors, acting upon the rumors, or doing shit like this without thinking about, consequences in the end. Mobs, crowds, they always fuck up things. So this is just horrible. This is, they are gonna, if rumors like this keep going on, they might basically take away all the people they are working on. Because let's be honest, governor made sure that they are gonna work there, they are gonna dig there, right? If governor said no money to anybody, just get the fuck out. This is a hoax. That's it. That's just fucked up.
Generators rumbled. Pumps churned out water. Men continued working in shifts and carrying away the earth.
This
Here
many
they are
hours
with
later?
strips of lumber to shore up the walls. They were only 25 feet down. The pace had slowed to 4 inches per hour. In their desperation, they resorted to dynamite, but this did little to the boulders. Despite all these bleak circumstances, people's spirits were high, because everyone
Come
was
on.
keen for their turn to dig. And because they had one more thing to latch onto. He is probably still alive.
After all these hours?
Now, how do they know that? Okay, so remember that light bulb around Floyd's neck? Well, it's powered by a simple copper wire. Bare copper wire is subject to very minute fluctuations in resistance. So, an engineer rigs up a radio amplifier to this wire to read the current and see those small fluctuations. There they were. About 20 per minute, the rate of steady breathing. As his chest expands and contracts, they can read it from this device. And so, they kept going.
Alright.
And going. And going. 30
Wait a minute, it's like 288. How much hours was there before? 228 to 288. 60 hours, and before there was already too many hours. You can't go that long without water?
hours was the original estimate. Now 144 hours had come and gone,
Come
and they
on.
were only at 44 feet. Then rain fell. Rain that mixed with dirt to make mud, much of which then froze to make ice. Ice which expanded and damaged the integrity of the shaft walls. Slowing down with every hour, they continued. Many more hours passed, and they were getting close. But it was now 15 days since Floyd was first stuck in that cave, and people had mostly lost hope. That excitement in the newspapers was tempering down. Visitors began clearing out from Cave City. Many still held on to hope, but their final lifeline, that light bulb, had burnt out. And it wasn't possible to do any more readings on the radio amplifier without it. No one knew if Floyd was still alive. Another 51 hours would pass before,
Come on.
finally, they reached the 60-foot depth.
I'm in! Chisel!
A chisel is handed down at 1:30 p.m. on Monday, February 16th. Sand Cave would open once again. For 17 days, Floyd had been trapped underground, stuck in the same position. 4 days without heat or light. 12 without food or water. But maybe the dripping of the cave water had provided him with some sustenance? There are stories of people surviving
is not
harsher
gonna end well.
extremes. Rescuers frantically tugged at rocks to widen the hole. Everybody stood by, absolutely silent, peering into that hole. Ed flashed his light into the gap, then eased himself in. Brenner aimed his light around the room, and then, finally, at Floyd. The first thing he saw was a golden shimmer. It was not the light bulb. It was the reflection of Floyd's tooth. His mouth hung open. He was dead. Brenner was helped out of the cave and he delivered the news.
Dead.
A coroner would later state that Floyd succumbed to exposure and that they had missed him by just 3 days, about the same time that the light bulb had gone out. But what would they do now with the body? The shaft walls were ready to fall inwards, and risking life.
So bulb was kind of giving him the heat. That was the kind of the point. So when the bulb go out, I guess that just made it more harder for him to survive without heat too, right? I don't know. I'm still thinking about the point where he didn't want to be alone in the end. He was scared because of that. He was sobbing, if I remember correctly, in the end when the cave-in happened. That just hurts, man. This story is too intense. This is just horrible. So all those hours when they were just outside, just, with hope, digging in, I can't stop but thinking that Floyd's hope were opposite of that, diminishing by every minute. Because he doesn't know what's going on, right? For him, it might be like people gave up or something, right? So I don't know, man. His state of mind by the end is just frightening to think about. Like, the man who was mentally strong at the start of it, where most of the people would panic, he didn't. By the end, he was frightened that he didn't want to be alone. And for all we know, his last moments were, if anything, were depressing in a way that he probably thought that everybody gave up or something, like there is no hope. I don't even know what to think of that, man. That's just horrible.
To remove a corpse was seen as just irresponsible. So the following morning, officials made a decision. Floyd would be entombed where he lay. The cave would keep its victim. Now, this did not sit well with the family, but what could they do? The next day, they planned the funeral. The town emptied of people, and the shaft with Floyd at the bottom was refilled with soil. But that's not quite the end of the story. But if you hung on for this long, keep holding on, because things are going to continue to get interesting. But first, let me do a wrap-up of where everyone is and all that stuff. Context. The Collins family already had financial hardship. Locals saw Old Man Lee scouring the rescue site for glass bottles. But the owner of the land, B. Doyle, and supposed friend of Floyd, was wholly unsympathetic. He erected a sign on the highway which said, 200 yards away, the body of Floyd Collins is imprisoned in Sand Cave. Then he began charging tourists 50 cents apiece for the opportunity to gander into the hole. It's 100 years later, B's dead. Let's call it even. Also, remember those claims of Kentucky being an open purse? Well, the state reneged on the deal. They refused to pay many of the rescuers, and most of them went home without any compensation. Some of them did make some money out of the situation, though. They lucked into vaudeville gigs and roamed the country, giving their first-person account. Miller, however, received an astonishing offer, a $50,000 contract from the Chautauqua Lecture Circuit, equivalent to the better part of $1 million in today's money. He declined.
Whoa.
He continued to work at the Louisville Courier-Journal. The following year, his coverage of Floyd's story earned him the Pulitzer Prize. Now, the brother, Homer, he needed money and he agreed to do that vaudeville circuit. He stood on stage and regaled the audience about tales of his brother, their childhood, and the tragedy. But Homer made it known why he was up here on stage trying to get money. He had a mission.
I kept thinking of Floyd lying in the muck, where he had suffered beyond our power to imagine. I would never have peace of mind if he remained there.
He wanted the money to dig Floyd up and get him out of that cave. A couple of months later...
Wait a minute, so let me get this straight. His family didn't want him there, his brother doesn't want him there. So what the fuck gives right to the government? They just decided, okay, that's going to be his burial site, just, throw the rubble down there, right? I mean, shouldn't they ask the family what they want at that point? And what an asshole the governor, basically, right? I mean, he just goes back to his word. Like, he just said blank check, and now what? Nobody's going to get any money?
He had it. Alright, so back to Floyd. April 17th, 1925. 7 miners showed up to the scene. They began to dig. Within a week, they had arrived at Floyd. And this time, they approached from the other side of the rock formation. That way, they could remove the rock pinning Floyd's leg. They lifted him up from his tomb and laid him down on the fresh air above. April 26th, 1925. Floyd was set to rest in the family cemetery. A stalagmite had been set as a headstone to mark out his plot.
Holy shit.
And there he lay. No, that's not actually where it ends. Okay, this is where it gets weird. 2 years later, 1927. Times have been tough for the Collins. So Floyd's dad sold Sand Cave to a dentist named Dr. Harry B. Thomas for $10,000. Now, Homer begged him not to, because at the time, the government was starting to buy up tons of land in the area and turn it into national parks. They had to pay at a very competitive rate. But Lee was becoming a bit old and senile by this point, and frankly, it's doubtful that he cared about Homer or Floyd or anyone else for that matter. It's 100 years later, he's dead now, let's call it even. So, the point is, in this land sale with Thomas, Lee agreed to a very odd clause. And that clause said, everything on that property belongs to Thomas. And should he wish, for example, to exhume a dead body and re-embalm it and put it on display in something really tacky like a glass coffin inside a cave, maybe, then that would be his prerogative. Lee signed yes. And Thomas did exactly that. Doyle made Floyd's corpse a tourist attraction. That's right.
What an asshole, man. Seriously. I mean, I understand he said that he was going senile, so I guess he wasn't even thinking straight. But still, man, what the fuck? First of all, can you do that? I don't think you can do that. What the fuck? You just sell a land saying everything there is you own. That doesn't imply somebody's dead body or something. What the fuck? Family can still fight back. Like that's the family member. You can't just own him as a fucking piece of property, right? I don't know, man. Like in the past, people used to bury their loved one in the land somewhere, right? If somebody buys that land, doesn't mean automatically all the dead bodies or something is just their property, even if it says in the clause, right? You can't just write up some kind of a agreement and just like, oh, that's legally binding. No, what the fuck?
Two bits of gander come and wonder at the incredible dead man who died in a cave. But to add insult to injury, it worked. Visitors returned to Sand Cave to gawk morbidly at Floyd. Within a few months, Thomas had turned Lee's failing farm into a successful business. Now, the rest of Colin's family is horrified. They try a number of times to get Floyd returned to them, including through the legal system. But somehow, incredibly, the judge ruled in Thomas's favor. And so, there he lay for the next 2 years.
Great justice system right there.
The cave was not done with Floyd. Until someone hatched a plan. 2 years later, it's midnight, outside Sand Cave. Footsteps can be heard rustling through the brush. Now, we don't know who these two men are, but we know why they are here. To rob a grave.
Is that
they
Miller?
sneak inside and clamber over the rocks in the darkness. Reaching Floyd's casket, they undo the latch and throw open the lid. There is his shriveled body. They throw him in a gunny sack, and they race off into the night. For 800 yards they carry dear Floyd, like a couple of sweaty Santas about to deliver a really terrible Christmas present. Panting, out of breath, knowing that they're going to get caught any minute, they reach the Kentucky Green River hillside. There's no time. With a 1, 2, 3, they launch his body towards the river, and Floyd goes sailing into the air, up, up, into the starlit beyond, and landing in a bush. Oh, God. The two men flee from the scene. Now, the next morning, Thomas notices that the body of Floyd is somewhat missing, and he contacts the authorities.
Into the bush? They didn't even try to correct their mistake. I mean, this must be his brother and I guess, someone else, right? Miller or something, I don't know, who just didn't like this. So they just like, okay, I guess if we can't, give him proper burial, I guess we'll give him, send off, throwing him into the river, I guess, right? I mean, lots of people around the world does, do that. Last send off, body in the river type of thing. I don't know.
The police come, they dust the casket for fingerprints, and bloodhounds are given Floyd's scent and let loose into the hillside. A few hours later, they managed to find him, a tangled up mess near the river, but this time with a leg missing, that same one that was trapped under the rock. So, despite his protest, it had been amputated. Neither the leg nor the culprits were ever found. And while it would be nice to think that this was some well-intentioned duo that did this out of the kindness of their hearts to free Floyd, it's much more likely that it was an act of vandalism because Floyd was simply too much of a hot tourist attraction. The following day, Floyd was cast back into the cave, back into his box, and it was covered by a metal lid, surrounded by a metal chain, and locked with a padlock. He was now more trapped than he had ever been. This cave had spun fate once again to make sure that its victim would never leave.
What the fuck?
And so,
this is heavy.
Time passed. Floyd's body would continue to decay. The rot from his body would eventually rot the casket too, and every decade or so, it would need to be replaced. A few years later, he was no longer on display, but even then, he remained in that box for many more years.
Whoa.
In 1961, Floyd's Cave was purchased by Mammoth Cave National Park, and it was closed to the public. There would be no more visitors. The entrance itself to Floyd's Cave was closed with a steel gate and bolted, then welded shut. But the Collins family never gave up objecting to Collins' body being left in the cave. And here is where the story ends. In 1989, at the Collins' request, the National Park Service ventured into Floyd's Cave. Continuing on a more than 60-year tradition, a team of people worked over the course of several days to remove him from the cave. They took him out, left the cave, locked it behind them, and laid Floyd to rest at the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery. After 64 years in Sand Cave, he is now finally at peace. The end. Thank you to Wendigoon as Floyd.
Seriously,
If you don't let me out, I'm going to hire a gang of hitmen to come to your house and kill your family.
Samito as Homer.
The BTS meal McDonald's bag that has
I'm
McDonald's
hungry.
and BTS. Shut the fuck up and eat some BTS, bro.
Ordinary Things as Miller.
I'm enthusiastic, but would ultimately duck out the back exit.
Rusty Cage as Gerald.
Oh, well, hello there. Haven't seen y'all in a while. Welcome to my new home.
And many kudos as Burden.
Hey, buddy. You right down there?
I can.
A little sleepy?
I can get out.
We get your coffee?
Cold and
Little cup of Joe? Little cup of Joseph?
I'm stuck.
Cup of Joseph from a little sleepy guy?
Also, by the way, in case you're confused about the channels, this is how it works now.
This is how it works now? Okay. Scripted content, interested. Unscripted content and different content, games basically. Does that mean he's not going to do any game video on this main channel? Because that would be sad, because scripted game content would be really good, like Fallout 76 and Good Name No Man's Sky. Something like that would be great, because that's one of his best videos, that is, right? Rightfully so. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, look, this was surprise from Internet Story and this type of story, right? I could see him going to this real world story type of way, but in the end, this is a tragedy, right? I get it, it's 100 years old and, enough time flies, I guess, yeah, you can make light of things, but this is tragedy. Internet Story is great at just, fucked up things, idiots being idiots, that kind of thing, or just screw-ups, basically. Covering a fucked up thing, okay, fine, this was a still Internet Story thing, like the end scenario that he created, like how two people were rescuing, how you build up those things. Like I said in the start of the video, Internet Story is great at making creative content like that. But yeah, that element, like this wasn't much of a rescue. It's just like competitors just getting fed up that this is just becoming more of a problem for them, since every tourist is going there, regardless of what the reason is. I guess he was put out of the cave at least. And I know look, in the end, when he died, that was it, right? Beyond that, it really doesn't matter, right? I mean, he was still in the cave. He was still trapped in the cave. Cave wasn't letting him go. None of that really mattered. By that point, he's just, dead matter, right? He's not alive anymore. So I'm not much of concern about the end point, but the journey so far, it was really fucked up, right? From the start to the end, what his mental state was by the end, that was just too fucked up. I don't know. I'm not gonna lie, at the start of the video, I'm like, okay, this is an hour video. Everybody's just, focusing on this topic. Surely, if the entire country is just focusing on this, enough expert could come and take him out, right? And they kind of did do that. They did kind of dig in, but it just took a long time, and that was the problem. But imagine if this had gotten traction really earlier, right? Really earlier, if this started to pick up and they came to this solution really earlier before trying anything else, they would have gotten him out. But yeah, whenever I watch Internet Historian video, it's just always like, oh, look at that was like Coast of Concordia, right? I mean, that was a tragedy, but it's just like, oh, look at that idiot, look at that. It's just, you just make light of the situation. This is a tragedy. So I watched a tragedy video from Internet Historian, which is already kind of surprised. But yeah. Alright, well, that was Manning Cave by the channel Internet Historian. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. I've done quite a few Internet Historian video already. If you haven't seen them, there's a playlist link in the description with all my Internet Historian reactions. And yeah, I'll see you next time.